We're back to the Neil Haley Show. My guest today is Mirabai Devi. She's a spiritual healer, teacher, internationally renowned, and author and podcaster. Mirabai, thanks for stopping by again. And we're going to go into learning more about your history. It's so important for people to understand how long you've been doing this. Wouldn't you agree, Mirabai?
Yes. I have a story to tell, and thanks for having me, Neil.
Oh, you have an amazing story. And we're going right now to talking a little bit about from a featured article you did with Mara Bright. And we'll talk about specifically enough, a little bit more about you and figuring out things of how you became a spiritual teacher. So kind of go into specifically what your focus is as a teacher.
Yeah, so I'm a new paradigm spiritual teacher, and my teachings emphasize the importance of spiritual practice and self-realization and all the aspects of personal growth, all the way from energy work to light work to the whole gamut of sadhana from the Eastern traditions. Particularly, I work from the Vedic traditions or the yogic traditions, but I also incorporate techniques across the board from many different traditions. So it's an eclectic approach, but it's also the two wings of the dove. The left wing is the personal growth, everything to do with, these aspects of growing yourself, whether it's affirmations, meditations, mantras, NLP, changing subconscious programming, belief systems, and on that goes, along with and affirming, along with the other aspects, which are much more to do with inner work, going inside and doing the internal energy work to clear blockages and heal trauma and release negativity and synthesize and integrate and incorporate these different energies that are out of alignment and bring them back into harmony or into wholeness in the light. And so it's about integrating the different aspects of the being. So that's your soul retrieval, that's your psychic surgery, that's your aspects of doing spiritual intuitive readings, that's going out into multidimensional communication, working with guides, working with loved ones and family members that are on the other side. So these are all the different aspects of my work that come together in a synthesis to help people to work through their patterns and to do self-reflection, so that they can come back into integrity, impeccability, wholeness, authenticity, empowerment, and sovereignty. And freedom is the main aspect. So I embody the divine feminine Shakti, or the divine feminine power, the divine feminine energy, which means that my approach is more receptive. It's receiving people in a sense that everybody is the divine, everybody is an embodiment of the divine, and everybody is stepping into the process somewhere from A to Z of realizing that they are an aspect of the divine, or that they are an incarnation of the divine, and that these different parts of ourselves, when they're integrated, we can start to move into higher and higher states of consciousness, and we can hold them and ground them. When we can hold and ground these higher states of consciousness, then we can move towards self-realization or enlightenment, which is basically just our natural state of our soul. It's who we really truly are. And so that's why it's important to recognize that everyone is equal, no matter what they are, if they're, their race, their religion, their sex, their culture, where they were born. Everybody is equal and the same. So that's the process of not wanting to necessarily be hierarchical, but more interactive. And I do many different types of light work or energy work with people. In particular, I've spent 30 years giving darshan, and now it's morphed more and more into the transmission of the divine light. Darshan was more typically a program where I would give through Shakti or divine energy through the eyes, or hugging people, or pulling the Kundalini energy up the spine through the chakras, or giving Shaktipat right on the third eye and transmitting strong currents and frequencies of light energy down the spine and into the chakras. But now this sort of format has morphed into group light transmissions, group transmissions of golden light, of divine light, of white light, of the spiritual energies of the divine essence or the divine flame. And that power of God, grace of God, light of God comes through in these group light transmissions. And then I couple that with group healing sessions and personal or private sessions to create empowerment, to help people heal their bodies and minds, and to help people to feel the power of the light. So really what I would say is that I push light into people to activate the light in them and transmit enough light into them to activate their inner light. And then the divine grace that comes through this divine feminine energy is what transmutes the karma or the negative energy from other lifetimes, childhood, and lineage. It's always past life karma, childhood karma, and lineage karma that the divine grace is transmuting through these high frequencies of light, which are being pushed into people. But specifically, when individuals are doing the practices, the spiritual practices and techniques that I give them, the combination of it helps them to move rapidly or accelerate into higher evolution, into greater awakening, out of the personal darkness into the collective light. And people wake up and they become grateful instead of victimized, joyful instead of suffering, free of pain instead of in trauma and pain and stuck. And so people's lives become incredibly empowered and uplifted. So we can talk a little bit, if you're interested to know more, about where I was born and how I came into all of this,
Absolutely.
Neil.
No, it's very interesting. Yeah, tell us where you were born and just to kind of know your background and specifically how you found this gift.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, on the 9th of March, 1970. And South Africa was a rough place to grow up in because I grew up right in the apartheid movement, when Nelson Mandela was in prison, was in jail, and the ANC party, they were fighting. There was a period before Nelson Mandela went to jail that I was still around, and they were fighting for freedom. So there was a tremendous revolution that was happening, both in our faces, in the media, but also subtly as an undercurrent. I remember being very consciously aware of that. And from the age of 3 years old, even though I was growing up in a Judeo-Christian household, I started to experience spontaneous visitations from divine masters and beings of light that were high spiritual awakened beings that were on the other side, guides, teachers, masters, master healers, and so forth, that came to comfort me, to awaken me, and to activate me to my life's purpose. So as I said, that began at 3 years old. I was very young when that started, and they would stand around my bedside at night and give me teachings and activations and instructions. And then the other piece of it is that they were taking me astrally to astral travel to other dimensions and to other planets and to other worlds, physical and non-physical. And I was being trained in these other places or dimensions or planets to work on the people or the individuals in those realms. Now, it sounds kind of strange to people who are not used to or conscious of other dimensions or other planets, but there are as many planets as there are grains of sand on all of the beaches on this earth around the world combined. There are so many different planets, and there is life. It may not be always physical life. It may be non-physical life or interdimensional life, or we can't necessarily see it through our naked eye. But there is also physical life on other planets, and there is physical life on other dimensions, as well as non-physical life. And I was being taken and groomed and trained to work on all different types of beings and to bring them from darkness and pain and suffering into the light through a number of different modalities, a lot of which I am now able to perform today from my training, and have been performing for 30 years with people all over the world, countless people all over the world. And so every night I would astral travel to these different places, and I would depart from the rooftop of my family home, and I would wonder why nobody could see me, or my various nightly flights. And later on, I came to understand when I was older that it was because it was my astral body that was flying, not my physical body, although it felt very physical to me. And so people can't see into the astral realm unless they're extremely clairvoyant. And I was going into these other dimensions and working on souls mostly that were non-physical. In other words, they weren't necessarily currently located into physical bodies. They may have crossed over to the other side. They may have been in darker realms. They may have been in heavenly realms, whatever it was. They were all, mostly the ones that were in darker realms, were all suffering tremendously and needed help and guidance. And we're very grateful to receive me and my trainers, which were different master teachers that took me to these realms and dimensions to help these beings, people, and all different types of beings. So this was something that I was doing from kindergarten. And so when I was in kindergarten, I was sharing with other children that I was ancient, that I could fly. And I tried to show my friends that I wasn't pretending, that I really could fly in my physical body. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it, of course. And that was very frustrating for me because I didn't understand the difference between my astral body and my physical body. Just like people don't understand the difference between their subconscious mind and their conscious mind, or they don't know that when they're dreaming and then they wake up, but the dream was so real, they don't understand that they were dreaming in the dream because it feels real in the dream. Well, that's the astral world. This is the physical world, or what I call the 3D world, or the 3D matrix. So at age 7, when I started school, I actually shut down from receiving regular visits or visitations from light beings, from divine masters. I stopped the astral traveling. I stopped going into the different worlds and dimensions because I wanted to be, quote unquote, normal. I wanted to be a normal child. I wanted to be just like everybody else. I didn't want to be different. And I had discovered at kindergarten, when I talked about all these amazing feats, that nobody was experiencing the same thing. And so I thought everybody experienced this and did this. And when I came to understand that not everybody was talking about being ancient or flying every night, or doing light work on multiple dimensions around the multiverse, I started to realize that I was alone and I needed to keep my mouth shut. And when I started to keep my mouth shut, I realized I needed to shut down. So that's why I shut down at 7 years old. And I did my best to attempt to live an ordinary life. So I went to school, I went to high school, I went to college, and I actually studied a BA in theater and dramatic arts. And I was an actress and a model. And I did a little bit of film directing and producing, and acted in theater on stage and also in film. And during college, this is when it started to break through. At the age of 16, 17, I started to experience spontaneous states of agony and ecstasy, where I would feel all the agony of all the pain, of all the suffering of anybody, everybody on the planet. And I would say beyond this world, also throughout the multiverse. And then I would go into states of ecstasy, where I was feeling the ecstasy of the divine, the highest states of consciousness started returning. And so I was swinging from feeling all this pain and suffering to being unified with God, with the light. And the astral projection started back up again after that. And I was frequently lifting and hovering out of my body at night, hearing the angelic choirs singing and being surrounded by luminous rainbows of light. And of course, I was being taken to different worlds again. And I was looking down on my body, realizing once more that I am not my body, and that I'm really not physical or non-physical. And so I didn't know how to communicate this. I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I was also very unhappy in the theater school, the drama school that I was studying at, because of the fierce competitive nature of the students and the inappropriate behavior of some of the teachers and professors. And so I entered a period of becoming suicidal. I became suicidally depressed. I completely shut down from the world, and I also stopped speaking except for essential communication. And I really was shutting out the backstabbing nature of the art students and the competition they were going through, as well as negative, the negative treatment of the very strict, strip you down, kill your ego, destroy your personality style of the particular drama theater school, and the breaking down of the individual, because they didn't have the skill set to build people back up. They were just breaking them down and then leaving them broken down. And I actually developed such a level of stage fright. I couldn't even speak a word when I was on stage. I would just freeze up and go into a state of paralysis. So I realized it was time for me to move on and go onto my spiritual journey, go onward on my spiritual journey after my college degree experience. And I was starting to really feel that I was receiving direct downloads from the divine beings, and I was starting to hear my inner voice giving me guidance and answers and messages, and I was starting to receive higher states of consciousness. So I stopped reading books and stopped reading scriptures, and I wanted to get direct dictation from the divine light, which I did receive direct dictation from the divine light, which was an amazing, amazing experience. And I finally finished and left the drama school a little early, and I left for India, and to my father's utter dismay, left college and went to go and live in ashrams in Scotland, England, Israel, a little bit in Turkey, in Holland, and then finally in India. And I ended up living with a guru, an avatar, a divine incarnation in ashram in India. And then I went to other ashrams in India. And that is where I had my awakening. So for the first year, I traveled through Europe and the Middle East before I had my awakening. And I was just searching, seeking, going to spiritual leaders, spiritual teachers, priests, and rabbis. And I was in every tradition. I was going to mosques, I was going to Hindu temples, I was going to Sufi traditions, I was going to Christian, monastic, living. I was going to Old City of Jerusalem, working with the original teachings of Jesus the Christ and Mary Magdalene, and working with the scrolls. And I was really, really in a deep process. And I was traveling through Turkey and Holland looking for the Sufi mystics. And that's when the ecstatic states of love and ecstasy just overwhelmed me, and spontaneous poetry started birthing through me. And I went into these ecstatic states of bliss where I was writing these love poems and love songs to God. And I was living in a perpetual state of bliss. And this was coming out of a state of suicidal depression the previous year. Now I'm probably at this point, I'm 21 years old. And I have been from the age of 18 through the age of 21, becoming increasingly more and more and more depressed till the point where I was suicidal, and left the college, when I was in my late 20s, and went on to Europe when I was 21. And so by the time I reached India, when I was 22 years old, I had already gone through the experience of having my heart chakra burst open and feeling like, the lake, the dam, the walls of the lake or the walls of the dam had burst open, and this overflowing waters of exquisite, divine, pure, unconditional love had burst throughout my entire being. And it was so much love, I couldn't contain it. And that's when the divine light started speaking through me with so much power and authority that everywhere I went, people felt the energy, and they wanted to help me and drive me and house me and learn from me and study from me. And it went to the next level where I went to India and I had my spiritual awakening, which I'll talk more about in another interview because we don't have enough time today. But I was on a rock in Goa and I just fell into a full state of enlightened samadhi or enlightened awakening. And that was where I completely dissolved in out of the physical realm or physical reality and consciously merged with the light for 8 weeks. And after that, that's where I literally started to receive these spontaneous gifts from the divine because I'd merged into such a high state of consciousness where spontaneous divine healings were coming through me. Anyone who came around me or touched me or came near me, their suffering went away, illness went away, pain went away, disease went away. And I describe it as like a near-death experience because it was like dying and going back home to the light or to the light of God. And I was in heaven. And I was in heaven, barely on the earth, but still walking on the earth. And in that state of consciousness, I was downloaded by the light, my mission to help teach and awaken humanity, to help them to experience what I had experienced. And what I had experienced was certainly so unique that I didn't even know how I was going to teach it because I felt like I had gone insane. And how do you possibly teach something that just happens to you spontaneously? Well, I'd done a lot of searching, a lot of seeking, a lot of begging the light, a lot of asking for answers. And I'd gone through the real dark night of the soul, very severe night of the soul. I mean, it was really a miracle that I didn't leave this planet at that point, you know, when I was younger through suicide because I was so depressed. And now I was in a new day, in a new way where the whole world was made out of light and everything was made out of divine energy. And I could hear the divine voice talking and speaking to me through everything. And the separation just dissolved. And now I had to learn how to integrate back into society. And so integrating back into society really took me 10 years. When I left India and came back home, I had to study every healing modality known to man that I could get my hands on. I read every scripture I could read that affirmed and confirmed every single one of my spiritual states and experiences. They were biblical, they were written in the Vedic scriptures, they were in the Upanishads, they were in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. These experiences happened to yogis thousands of years ago. They were writing my experiences. And so in that space, I asked the light to shut down my healing gift and my healing powers in 1992. And it took 10 years for the full thing to be restored. And then I started to give workshops all over Europe and all over South Africa. I was brought to the United States on spirit guidance in 1997. And that began my journey from 1997 until 2003 of teaching to groups all over the United States, establishing centers, my Lightworker training school, giving the darshans through my Divine Feminine movement, speaking at conferences and festivals, putting together and recording my CDs and my book, and writing hundreds of thousands of written articles and materials for tools for people to learn and study, as well as audio recordings, and then putting together spiritual practices for people to learn so that they could take the steps on the path towards their own awakening and their own healing. And so I really divided my mission into two different branches. One was the healing gifts and helping people with illness, challenge, negativity, dis-ease, limitation, accidents, injuries. And of course, in that began more of my communication interdimensionally, communicating with animals as an animal communicator, working with people with strokes who couldn't speak, Down syndrome children, or people who couldn't speak, people in comas who couldn't speak, translating for the family telepathically, or working with animals to translate to their trainers or owners telepathically, and then working with humans all over the world. This led me to lead pilgrimages in Brazil, in Peru, in Mexico, in South Africa, and also in Europe. And that has taken me back many times to all parts of the world. I go back every year to South Africa. and everything was in person until the beginning of the pandemic. When the pandemic began 4 years ago, I moved everything onto Zoom and onto phone, and I have been leading everything on Zoom and phone until May 2022, where I went back out on tour in person. And so I have been also leading workshops and programs in person throughout the United States since 2022 in May, and I'm continuing to do so throughout 2023 and 2024. I also spent a lot of time giving programs in Australia, and I will continue, and in Canada, of course, and I will continue to do that again in 2024. Even though my home base has been in Hawaii for the past 18 or 19 years, my work has just expanded to lead me to so many places to give teachings and to share healings that honestly, I'm not in Hawaii as much as I used to be before. And so for people who want to come and take retreats with me in Hawaii, they have to book certain times of the year where I return home to those places where I am mainly on the islands in Hawaii, because most of the time on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. And I will continue to be in various parts of the US. And so really, I would say if people want the opportunity to learn more about my Lightworker Training School or to learn more about my programs and workshops, they can do my online Zoom programs and Zoom classes now, as well as in person in cities on my tour, wherever I'm going to. They can check out my website, which is mirabaidevi.org, or they can also check out apoweroflove.com, or also my store, which is apoweroflove.com/store, or the store on mirabaidevi.org. And also I have many video interviews on YouTube that people can check out if they want to learn more about my style, my teachings, how I do them, or receive a divine light transmission. That kind of gives people, Neil, an overall picture of my life, really from 1973 through to 2023.
It's amazing to finish up as we're going to finish up this interview, because I learned so much in this story that you went through a lot of ups and downs to finally finding to say, I'm going to stick with my gift. It was tough, right? Because you wanted to be normal. You didn't want to be extraordinary. And why do you think that was? Why that was?
Yeah, I really feel that I was carrying some past life karma about staying under the radar and being afraid of being locked up imprisoned or put in an insane asylum for these higher states of consciousness and these healing gifts. Because in the old days, the days of witch hunts, the days of suppression of the spiritual nature, the suppression of the freedom of truth speaking, the healing arts, a lot of these things have been controversial for centuries on our planet. In many ways, we're on a dinosaur planet. It's like a toddler kindergarten generation still. We're not an enlightened race or an enlightened civilization. And I'm certainly working 35 years now, really, going on to awaken as many individuals as possible so that this can become the new normal for all of humanity. But we're just not here yet. We're not there or there yet.
So at that time, it was not worth it. It sounds like to me when you were at that point, so you got the right guidance, it seemed like it was not the right move at that time compared to now, how the growth's happening now, where people are more open to what you teach compared to.
There's a yoga studio on every block. There's healing centers, there's chiropractors, there's acupuncturists, there's hypnotherapy, there's every type of modality everywhere throughout the US, Canada, Australia, South Africa. It's huge, and now it's no longer sort of like a hidden thing. So I can really share openly and express with people because it's current. And I'm so grateful that the world has moved so far between 1973 when I started my work to now in 2023. And I pray that we will have a revolution in consciousness, and that we really will see what we're seeing now will be just nothing to what's going to come in the future.
Absolutely. And that's so true. And so to go to mirabaidevi.org, and we'll have part 2 very, very soon. There's so much more to ask you, and I look forward to the next conversation, Mirabai.
Great. Thanks, Neil. I'm looking forward to it too.
You're listening and watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.